Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today I have a very interesting video for you as I want to explain to fans the compensatory pick formula. Now, why am I doing this? And I encourage you to at least listen to the sentence before you click off and say, oh, this is too crazy, the numbers are insane, because this is a very complicated process. The point is, I want fans to be able to understand why a team would spend in free agency, why they want, what we're going to get back from certain players. The main point among that is about Calvin Ridley, right? Because he didn't get franchise tagged. He's going to walk most likely in free agency unless Jacksonville throws a bag at him, and it's going to have to be a big one, right? So we're kind of preparing for this. And I want to make sure that you guys can understand what the situation is as we watch players leave and players sign, and how they can try to spend in free agency and also get the comp pick. Because we know that if you spend a lot, you're not getting picks in return because you're replacing the value you lost. But there's ways to work around that system. And so that's what we're going to explain today. And for any fans, that maybe aren't Jaguars fans and just want to learn about this, it'll be a good video for you as well. Be using a lot of examples with the Jaguars, but still applies to every team. So we're going to jump into this. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to explain the definition of a compensatory free agent. So a compensatory free agent is a player with an expiring contract who has the right to leave their team on their own will. Now, this does exclude franchise tag and transition tag. I want to make that clear because every player could be franchise tag or transition tag minus the few that have conditions where they can't, right? So exclude that from the conversation. The other parameter is that they have to fall within the top 35% of all players. In a website we're going to use a ton today to explain all this, and it is a great resource for you if you want to understand the stuff, you want to do more reading, and there'll probably be some details I miss as I go through this, so it's really good to check if you're into this sort of stuff. Over the cap. You see me use this a lot for salary cap, for calculating what contracts could look like. It is a great tool. It is worth using their website, and if you want to, subscribing to their website, because they have a lot of extra stuff that you can also learn off of it. This is available to the public, though. You guys can access all of this. But that's what a CFA is. So we're going to go through all the players in the NFL. I'm going to show you examples of what players fall into what round valuation. So this includes every player, right? This isn't just free agents this year. This is ranking all players because that is the requirement for the top 35%. It's not just the free agents signed. It's all players in the NFL. So you'll see the rank. That's not the really important part. The important part is the round. We're calling this a round value. Also, I apologize. You hear any noise in the background. I'm in a different environment than what I usually am recording, but it'll make do. Justin Herbert is the top player here. And the reason why is because it takes three things into consideration. It takes your average per year, which right now, I don't know if he's the largest, but he's like tied for it or really close, right? And then he played a ton of snaps this last year. So Justin Herbert is the top guy on this list. And there's so many players we're considering that being one or two higher or one or two lower really doesn't matter a lot. But that would be an example of a top contract, right? So you can see that there's different things factored in for points. The main thing is average per year. It is the huge weighting factor. As you can see, it goes up to nearly 2,000 points. Whereas for the amount of snaps you play, which is derived from your snap percentage, it's rounded down, as you can see. That only goes up to 100. And postseason honors, I believe, only goes up to like 20. So it's really not a huge factor. But these are things that can set apart later players because you have way less average per year, right? So I want to show you where the cutoff is for the third round. This is an important thing for us to understand. So why I'm saying this, because you need to understand why Calvin Ridley will count as a third round compensatory pick to start. And there's also another part of this as far as how the picks cancel each other out, where the Jaguars, if they want that compensatory pick, they have to spend at an amount that falls under a third round value. So the reason why, Calvin Ridley would qualify, right? We're talking about him earning maybe 22, 23 million right now, correct? So you look at the average per year. You're at 16 million here with your last guy. And then you get some under this that are, even over 16 million. But this is roughly your mark where you're looking at. Calvin Ridley's going to earn well over this, right? Because he's going to be looking at probably, like I said, 22, 23, even 24 million in free agency because he's the big hot commodity on the market. He will be a third round compensatory pick. I don't see how there's any way around because if he isn't, well, the Jaguars can afford that deal. He will be back on the team, and that's just best case scenario for them. But if he walks, you're getting the third rounder. So the CFAs you sign, this is how the cancellation process works, okay? We're going to go over here. We're going to take a look at this. So let me scroll to the proper, yep, here we go. So I'll highlight this so you guys know where to look. And you can see up here as well how they assign the rounds. So it shows the highest range and the lowest range. So it's top 5, top 10, 15, 25, 35. And then after that, they're non-CFAs because it won't even be a draft pick. It's after the 7th round. So the way this works, CFAs, when you sign them, they will cancel out the highest valued CFA lost with the same round valuation. So, for example, if you sign someone who is worth a 4th round valuation, that CFA will first search for one that you lost that is worth a 4th round valuation. And if there's multiple, it will cancel out the highest one of those. The next step is that if there's no CFA loss with that same round valuation, so let's say we're still working with 4th round, right? It will then look for the highest valued CFA you lost of a lower value. So that would be 5th, 6th, 7th round, if that makes sense. If there is nothing there, it will then be forced to look for the lowest value CFA of all the ones above. So that would be your 3rd round values. So that is how the cancellation process works. Now, how you play this, how do you spend a lot and get away with the compensatory free agent? The simple answer is that you want to sign less players than the amount you lose, considering these players are all CFAs. Now, some players don't count as CFAs, so I want to explain that really quick. A CFA is a player who has an expiring contract. I mentioned that earlier. Players who are released are not CFAs. They do not qualify. Team will not get the pick. It will not cost the team a CFA pick for signing the player. So first, let's take a look at an example of what the Bills did. Then I'll show you an example of a player who was released by the Jaguars, signed by another team to a big deal, and had no factor in the CFA process. So, Buffalo Bills, 2024. So what this means, this is the year you're getting the picks. So this is 2023 free agency, because what we would get for a comp pick out of this free agency is for next year's draft, not 2024. So look at the Bills here. They lost more CFAs than they gained. That is what matters. That's what you're shooting for. Because of that, they end up getting a pick. And obviously, you have one that could be a 3rd, one that could be a 7th, and one that could be a 7th. So which one do you want? Obviously, the 3rd round pick. You want to be picking earlier. That's higher value by far. So what they did was they signed 2 players that were CFAs. They limited themselves to that much because they knew these 2 players were people we would lose that would be CFAs. So they signed Connor McGovern, and you see a round value of 5 here. And they signed Deontay Hardy, round value of 6. So the way this works, you go first to Connor McGovern. The round value is a 5th round value. It searches for someone worth a 5th. There's no one there. So it can't cancel out anyone yet. The next step, the 2nd of 3, is it looks for the next highest value that is below it. So instead of canceling out this 3, it cancels out the 7. And the same thing happens with Deontay Hardy, which is worth a 6th, right? Because You don't have another 6th over here that you lost, so then it goes down to the 7th. Now, say the Bills signed a third compensatory free agent. Say it was a player, they signed 1 year, $3 million. Because this is all about APY. It's not about the entire contract value. The years don't matter. It's the average per year. If they just signed someone who is worth a 7th round value, because it doesn't have a pick to cancel out at the same or lesser value, it then cancels out Tremaine Edmonds. So the Bills last offseason, when they're in this situation, you put yourself in their shoes. They're not going to consider signing a CFA worth 3 or 4 million, because if they do that, they're giving up a 3rd round pick. So they're asking themselves, is it worth trading, 100th overall pick, because that's roughly what it would be, for this player? Because that's essentially what it is. There's almost kind of a trade process involved in this. And that's what the Jaguars will go through if they lose Calvin Ridley. So they'll have to ask themselves, if we want to spend money, is it worth giving up a 3rd round pick next year? And they probably will be fine with that. We'll see. Because honestly, their jobs are on the line this year. But that's how the cancellation process works. Now, for an example, like I mentioned earlier, about a player who doesn't count as a CFA and showing that they do not count. Let's talk about a former Jacksonville Jaguar from a long time ago. Malik Jackson. This is a player who's part of the Saxonville days. Someone that was a pretty good player. Not necessarily the best of the best on the team, but he was a positive. And you get to 2019. This is when the team really started to struggle. They paid Blake Bortles a huge contract. You can even see they released him here. And so they ended up having to make a lot of moves, trying to fix the cap, trying to get back on track, right? After a really bad year. So they released Malik Jackson, who I think was slated to earn like $11 million that year. So that was one of their moves. And check the date here, because that's another important part. Because it's March 8th, 2019. And we want to watch the date that the Eagles signed him, which is the other side of this. Players that sign with the team after a certain date, I believe it's either the Monday or Tuesday after the NFL draft, so this would basically be May and beyond, those players do not count as CFAs no matter what their situation is. CFAs are gone. You can sign players at will at that point. It has no impact. So that's when we start to see things set in stone more. I believe there's other ways you can lose those picks, but that's kind of the cutoff. That part of it I don't fully understand. Usually we don't see them change at that point, so it's not super relevant here, but you can do some research on that if you'd like. So March 8th, 2019. Defensive tackle Malik Jackson is released. Let's go to the Philadelphia Eagles, 2019 transactions. 5 days later, agreed to terms with defensive tackle Malik Jackson to a 3-year contract. That's before the draft, right? So new league year has started. The Eagles have signed a player before the draft. So theoretically, he can fall into the CFA conversation. But the reason why he doesn't qualify is because the Jaguars released him. So that doesn't become a CFA because a CFA is a player with an expiring contract. And I apologize if I repeat this over and over. I'm doing it because it's a very complicated process. I want to try to hammer things home that are really important in this because it can be super easy to not understand. So to show you how big this contract is and why this would obviously fit as being a top 35% player, 3 years, $30 million. He was earning $11 million originally, went down a bit to $10 million, but the Eagles sent him a big contract. This would obviously fall as a CFA if he was not released. So, I mean, you could see players in here. We get down to like around $10 million. This would have been a 5th round value if he just had an expiring contract. So, work our way back over here. You can see Eagles ended up signing him to a big deal. Now we look at the 2020 compensatory picks. So what this means, this is awarded in the 2020 draft. This is from 2019 free agency. And the reason why you can tell that is if I go up to the Jaguars, you'll see an old friend, Nick Foles, in here, right? Signed in 2019. We all know that. That would be proof of that. So Let's go down to the Philadelphia Eagles. You can see they got a lot of comp picks, right? Because, Nick Foles got a mega deal. I'd like to pretend that didn't happen, but it did. But look at the non-CFAs. Look at the CFAs, and this is the website you'll use if you want to follow this during free agency. You don't see Malik Jackson anywhere because what this is denoting is players who could be eligible to be a CFA if their value falls within the top 35%. So the Eagles didn't sign a single player that had an expiring contract and was within the top 35% of earners. So you can see, even like on their CFAs lost, they didn't get a comp pick for this because it's $800K, right? Like that's not a top 35% player. In fact, now that would be like less than the absolute minimum that you could earn. So that's an example of where this does not count. So now, I want to give you guys an example of how this offseason could go. And this will be the more Jaguars-centric part of this video. So let's give you some players that we could possibly see for the Jaguars being CFAs. So actually, I don't have the page up here. I'm going to navigate my way to free agent spending. Here we go. Salary cap, and we'll go through some of these players that would be free agents this year. I might have to give it a second to load. Okay, there we go. So here are 5 players that I believe could be CFAs lost for the Jaguars. The first one to note is Calvin Ridley. Like we said at the beginning of the video, he would absolutely qualify because it's an expiring contract. He's getting a huge deal. That deal is going to fall within the top 5% of all deals in the NFL because he will earn well over $16 million. If he does not, he will be back with the team because they will surely pay him that much. And at that point, this all won't even matter. But you'll know it for the next year, right? So Calvin Ridley, he will qualify. The next highest one, and the last really high one you'll probably see, is Ezra Cleveland. Whether or not you like him, whether or not you think he did good, he's going to earn a decent amount on the market. Right now, his contract projections are around $8-9 million. So he is another player that if he walks, and I'll be honest, I think he will. I don't really trust Trent Baalke to get negotiations done there. Obviously, we see how that has went with other players. But Ezra Cleveland will also be one that qualifies because even if it's like a one-year deal, say he gets a prove-it deal, and it's maybe $6 million, we can navigate down here to that point. I mean, we're talking about a 6th rounder still, right? So he's going to be a CFA lost if we don't re-sign him. Now, there's 3 others that are a little more questionable, but I think will qualify. The first that I'm most confident in is Trey Herndon. Here's the reason why. Herndon signed a $2.6 million deal with the Jaguars in 2023. 1 year. And he barely made it back to Jacksonville. There was a lot of competition for him. Whether or not you think he deserved that, that's the truth. I think he did personally because he's a solid starter. So we have to now consider what is the cutoff? Like, what do you have to meet to be top 35%? And that's the thing we actually haven't looked at on here yet, so I'll scroll down for you. And we'll actually use the search. You can see Trey Herndon this last year, what he did. He is a 7th round value just on the contract he earned. Now, if I want to just show you how he performed this year, just for PFF, just to give you an idea of how teams will see him. This was actually his best year as a player. A lot of green games. Yeah, you got some 40s in here, some 50s. Look at the defensive grade. He had a better year, and the amount of snaps was identical, so we're not going to see that snap amount change. And that doesn't really change a whole lot here anyway, because the APY is so high as far as the value here. So Trey Herndon would absolutely, in my mind, be a CFA, because another team will probably pay him $3 to $4 million, realistically. And if they don't, I'll be pretty shocked. That's what you need to be rooting for. You need to see these players get paid. Now, the next example, You will tell me there's no way this could possibly happen. This is insane. Calvin Chason currently qualifies as a 7th round value. So you see his earnings, it's considerably higher. It's about 3.5 million roughly, and he played 30% of the snaps. Now, Chason, did he work out in Jacksonville? No. But you know another player that didn't work out in Jacksonville, and you might have seen him up here the whole video? Taven Bryan. Okay, these are 2 draft picks that Jaguars fans have loathed and players that they've just wished to get off the team forever because they're a reminder of how bad this team used to draft. Just the truth. Taven Bryan, after he finished with the Jaguars in 2021, keep in mind his contract. It was 4 years. They didn't accept the 5th-year option. He walked. He went to the Browns. He earned $3.9 million with the Browns. That is a player who was a bust in the 1st round, okay? Calvin Chason was drafted higher in the 1st round. He had just about the same exact career as Taven Bryan. So do I think Calvin Chason's going to get a 1-year deal from a team that can convince themselves, oh, we know what we're doing. We're better than them. They're stupid. They're the Jaguars. We're going to get so much out of this player because we think we can. Is that going to happen? I think it will. I think it's happened quite a bit. We even talk about Javon Kinlaw, another potential bust from that year who showed a little bit of life this season. He will probably get $5 million on the market, and he might even qualify as a 6th round guy. So I think the Calvin Chason is absolutely going to hit that value, right? And you keep in mind the Jaguars paid him at this value this season too, so he wasn't even worth cutting for him. So that is something to factor in. Now, the final one that I want to talk about, I'm not completely sure where he falls. And right now, he's pretty high on this list. Jamal Agnew is currently a 6th rounder. The thing that's going well for Agnew is that he made the Pro Bowl in 2022. So, and I think he was an alternate, but still, that has value. And I think teams that see him on the market, if they sign him at some point, hopefully before the draft, and that's what you have to be rooting for if you don't want him back on the team, you have to hope that he gets a decent deal and probably earns at least $3 million for a season, which I think could happen. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. But this is the one I'm probably the least confident in. Not that I think it's 50% or more that they won't get this compensatory pick, but this is what you have to watch, right? Because here's the logic that we get from this, okay? You have 5 players that you think can qualify as CFAs. And just to prove that, like, there's no one else we're really talking about. Okay, I did mention, one guy I didn't mention is Dewan Smoot. I apologize for that. He would be the 5th one. So Smoot, he earned like 3 or 4 million this last year, I believe. He will get a deal from another team. Yeah, you can see 3.5 million. He's going to get that from another team because he will be healthy the whole year. That won't be factored in, even if he had a down year. Teams are still going to see the value there. So I think he goes somewhere else, earns a bit of money. We'll see what happens, right? But talking about other players here, Shatley is not going to hit the mark. He's never earned $2.5 million a year, which is kind of where you're looking. You want to get over that by a bit to make sure, because then snap count matters and postseason honors matter, and obviously this team didn't make the postseason. Brandon McManus, he doesn't hit the mark either. Daniel Thomas, if he walked, he could get close, but I don't see him earning over that. I don't think he gets over $2 million to be a special teamer. Just my take on it. And that's all you got here. So 5 players is the most you can have. Now, applying this logic, we go back to the Bills. Take a look at them. You need to have more CFAs lost than CFAs gained. And your CFAs gained have to be under a 3rd round value. They cannot be a 3rd round value because they will cancel out the Calvin Ridley comp pick. So what you need, if they lose 5 CFAs, and they all count, the Jaguars can sign 4 CFAs, so compensatory free agents, and they can be players that fall anywhere from 2.5 to 3 million, all the way up to maybe 16 million. And I would try to keep it under that mark if I can to be safe, because you never know what the other deals are. And when you get so close, just what happens with other players can be a factor. And you don't want to make a minor mistake like that costs you a big time. So you can sign, in the best case scenario, 4 CFAs. Now be watching as well for players that have been released that can be starters. Those are the best ones that you can go after. Take, for example, and I don't know if I'd like these players a ton to be additions to the team, but maybe a Mitch Morse from Buffalo, or another Buffalo player in Tre'Davious White, if you think he fits on this team. I haven't done my research into him. I don't know personally, but those players don't count because they were released. So if the Jaguars focus on players that have been released from their teams, and then they limit how many CFAs they sign, they will get a third-round pick in 2025 if Calvin Ridley walks. So that's what you need to know. And if you want more information, you want to see this in writing, go to my Twitter page. I've got a whole breakdown on it. It was posted on March 6th, 2024. So you can read all about it there. I have some players listed as well that could be targets for the Jaguars. So that's how this works. And like I said early on, obviously, if they want to, they could just spend big. And the question for them, assuming they lose Calvin Ridley very early in the process, which I think they will, I think he'll be a day one signing. If they lose Calvin Ridley, they have to ask themselves, is it worth giving up, the third round pick that we're going to get, which is going to be somewhere from 97 to maybe 103, 104. Is it worth giving that up to go after a Danielle Hunter? Or say Mike Onwenu ends up earning a ton of money, hits a Cam Robinson number. Is it worth that? You have to ask yourself that question. It almost becomes a trade scenario. Would you trade that third rounder to go get good players? And the important part is that once you do that once and the comp pick is canceled, it doesn't matter from there because you're not getting anything else of value that matters because all those picks are going to be wiped out, or you're going to be talking about seventh rounders who have basically no impact, right? That's the question you need to ask yourself, and that the Jaguars will ask themselves when it comes to next Monday for free agency. So I had a lot of fun researching this. It was hard to find this stuff. I hope I've given you guys good information on it. Definitely, if I've missed something, if there's something incorrect, please call me out on it because I don't want to put this out and have a bunch of people watch it and be misinformed. So if there's something that's wrong, absolutely let me know. I want to know if that's the case. I'm very confident, though, in the research I've done and obviously found a lot of examples for this. So it's not like we're just talking out of our ass on it. So that's what I've got for you. Let me know what you thought, though. Let me know what you think. What would you do? Would you give it up? Would you be relaxed? Would you try to build long-term, keep the pick? What's your thought? Who are your free agents? We're going to talk about all that stuff this weekend as well. We get into offensive and defensive fits and our predictions for 2024 free agency. So thanks for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.